certain points of similarity with the intervention of Dr. Ali Fayyad on the importance of certain principles in order to have a serious and effective dialogue. I give the floor to Dr. Jamaan Ben Raghoch, the president of Prince Nayef University for Security Sciences in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He came here especially to participate in this conference, and he will replace Dr. Ali Fayyad, who will have to return to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in the afternoon. Thank you. Your Excellencies, Your Highnesses, ladies and gentlemen, may the peace of God be with you. It is a pleasure for me in this important venue and in the capital of peace. It is my pleasure to speak today about dialogue. Dialogue is not new. When the two children of Adam were the first to appear on earth, a crime was committed, and also the media existed, and security media already existed, and also the lack of respect of the rights of human beings already existed. This was so, and there were only two people on earth. You can imagine now, with millions of people on earth, problems have become more complex, and we have many conditions that hinder the efforts to create a world characterized by peace, tolerance, and tolerance. When Dr. Ali Awad asked me to talk about security information and the role it plays in enhancing and supporting a culture of dialogue, I thought to myself, is security information a term that is clear to all those who work in the media? Is security information a term that is understood by all those who deal with the mass media or the means of information? And where is the relation between the support of security information and the support to the culture of dialogue? Undoubtedly, we all agree on the fact that any dialogue must be created in a context characterized by safety. We also have to distinguish between dialogue and arguments. God, and here this is a quote from the Holy Quran that relates a story of a woman who was arguing with her husband because she wanted to express her suffering, but she wasn't listening. And God, the Almighty, said, God hears you. She was actually addressing herself to the Prophet, and God said that he can listen, and he heard this dialogue or argument, conversation, let's say. This is why the most important aspect of dialogue is equality. If two parties are communicating and they are not on the same level, this cannot be considered as a dialogue. When we speak of dialogue, as my colleagues said before me, and as some might say after me, dialogue depends on many conditions, many factors. However, if we wish to have a dialogue as individuals and peoples or nations, we have to commit to the conditions of dialogue in general, because a dialogue between individuals is no different from a dialogue between cultures or nations. As for security information, as you know, information and most of the people present here are specialized in the field of information or have experience in such a field. However, we from the university, Nayef Arabs University, we have included security information as one of the branches of information. And it deals with security information, deals with security issues. And it, in turn, may divide into two branches. The first is the official one, and it is, let's say, the information given by security institutions, which in turn may be divided into another two sections. The first is the informative part that propagates information on the work of the security institutions. And information is conveyed in an extremely simple and clear manner, which means that the receiver feels secure. If the security institution is characterized by transparency. And the second consideration is that the means of information are actually concentrate on conveying the message in a clear and secure way. This is concerning the information conveyed by the official institutions. The second branch is that of the free means of information, or the independent mass media.
والجرائم بكل أنواعها وصورها، وهو في هذا يتجاوز كثيرا ويبالغ كثيرا، يتبعه لذلك عددا من المنطلقات تتعلق بمصالح قد تكون شخصية، وقد تكون أيضا اجتماعية، وقد تكون أيضا حزبية، وقد تكون أيضا طائفية، دون الاهتمام بمحتوى وصدق هذه الرسالة الإعلامية. وبالتالي فإن كلا القسمين نعم.
سامعين؟
Les interprètes.
Can you hear me? Oui? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. This is why both branches of security information, whether the formal or the independent ones, both branches have to convey messages that are subjective, transparent, and that reflect the truth. Otherwise, we will have to we'll have to deal with dire consequences, and we may have to face greater animosity, rejection, isolation of certain groups. Ladies and gentlemen, these are some of the problems we face in trying to initiate a dialogue. Any dialogue needs preparation at whichever level, whether the political, religious, cultural, economic level. Independently of the type of dialogue we need, we have to precede such a dialogue by mutual respect, each party respecting the point of view of others, whether the different point of view is accepted or not by the other. We may meet halfway, or we may stay divided, but we must insist on the importance of certain factors that I have mentioned and that some of my colleagues have mentioned before me. We need, at the end of the day, a true information message characterized by subjectivity and transparency in relaying news concerning security issues, so as to guarantee or overcoming certain difficulties that may hinder dialogue. All components of society complete each other. Why do we have such, and all religions complement each other? So why do we have conflict or diversions among religions? This has been created by the followers of religions. And although certain laws may differ, they complement each other. And once we have the intent of excluding a certain party, this will lead to conflict or diversions, or this is why equality is a main component of dialogue. I have to respect the time assigned to me, but in conclusion, I wish to say I hope that we will be able to live in security. I wish to thank Dr. Ali Najib Awad for inviting me to participate in this conference that is scientific and that has an international character. Through this conference, we will launch a call upon all parties to initiate a true dialogue independently of the subject and the parties concerned. I wish to thank the rapporteur for giving me the time to speak, and I thank all the participants, hoping to to come out from this conference with a message of love and peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jamaan Ben Raghoch, for your intervention about security information, in which you have identified that equality is an important condition for successful dialogue. Personally, I see equality as useful in dialogue, but dialogue might actually be the mean to reach equality, as dialogue can sometimes be held by unequal parts. Now I give the floor to General Dimitrios Zafeiropoupos, head prosecutor of Athens Military Appellate Court Senator and the vice president of the International Society for Military Law and the Law of War, and he will be speaking about information and the implementation of human rights in conflicts in order to promote dialogue. Sir, you have the floor.
شكرا جزيلا معالي الرئيس.
Thank you so much, Mr. President.
Distinguished colleagues and friends, ladies and gentlemen, it is really a great honor and privilege for me to be among you today in an exceptional event being devoted to humanitarian dialogue in association with human rights. Behind this event, as you probably know, is the International Center for Strategic Research and Information, a scientific association which has attached particular importance on strengthening the role of scientific research in order that scientific knowledge is reached. 4 decades ago, actually in 1976, while at University's Law School, I had my first touch with international law. And a great number of particular issues, as it is the case throughout the universities, related to public international law were then thoroughly discussed and examined. At a later stage, 5 or 6 years later, when at that time I was serving actually as a legal advisor at the Legal Affairs Directorate of the General Staff, I received my first paper with legal questions on international humanitarian law, law of war, and human rights law, which had to be addressed. And upon receipt of the paper, I had the impression that I had not received the necessary knowledge at the university to address those issues. And I remember I checked my books and papers, and I realized that issues like international humanitarian law, human rights law, and law of war were just mentioned in our public international law books, thoroughly taught and read at the university, at that time with footnotes and asterisks at the bottom of some pages. And the same situation at that time was also noticed more or less not only on national administration level, but also in well-known international organizations of the time, such as NATO and the then European Economic Community. Of course, in the 70s and 80s, the various nations had already signed very important international documents on those issues, such as the 1949 four Geneva Conventions on the protection of victims of armed conflicts, which still constitute, more than 65 years later, the core of international humanitarian law. The 1966 International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And of course, again, at that time, we had the dissemination provisions on all 4 1945 Geneva Conventions, asking signatory nations to take all necessary measures in order that the then agreed, most universally, basic rules and principles of international humanitarian law and the law of war are well respected and properly disseminated. However, various states and the international organizations of that period had somewhat left aside at that time the long and very painful process of having negotiated and having reached agreement on the fundamental humanitarian and human rights principles contained in the international documents I already mentioned. And instead, they seemed to be rather reluctant at that time to implement and incorporate those principles in their domestic laws and regulations, and to work for an adequate dissemination thereof in line with the particular contractual provisions of international conventions they had signed. Now, 40 years later, more or less, after my negative personal experience mentioned already, there is no doubt that the difference is obvious, and I'm really inviting you now to sit together with me. There is no question that we now have a great bulk of international documents on those issues signed in the meantime, and we now see that international humanitarian law, the law of war, and the human rights law constitute some of the main concerns of public international law, if not the most important ones. And there are no footnotes, no asterisks in public international law university books on those issues anymore. Moreover, the national and international scientific events like this, there is a broad and intense reference to those issues. In international organizations, those issues now play a real and very significant role. You see references to those issues on almost all legal papers prepared and being issued by them. And on the other hand, the various nations have adopted domestic laws and regulations and have widely underlined the importance of humanitarian and human rights issues. They have edited and distributed books and leaflets on basic international humanitarian law, law of war, and human rights law, principles at schools, universities, and administration, including, of course, their militaries. And they have included related issues in their military exercises in order to have their personnel properly trained. They have inserted severe criminal provisions for sanctions to be imposed to perpetrators, particularly in their military jurisdiction systems, and they have established national committees, more or less, in order to secure a proper dissemination of the related principles in their people. Now, where is the reason why nations and international organizations have shown such a positive attitude against those principles in the meantime? I believe the answer is very simple, and it is because it is simply based on the fact that they believe more and more, by the passing of the time, in humanity and human dignity. And they have realized that merits and values having to do with human beings should be safeguarded and strengthened by all means, since they constitute our existence itself. In the light of those developments, could we say now that we would feel happy enough to realize that we have met our legal and moral obligations properly and that we have settled all difficulties? Of course, the answer is negative. It is more than evident that despite all efforts from the part of the nations and international organizations, the problem is there. It is not so strong, not so acute as it was some decades ago, however, it is still there. On a day-by-day basis, however, a conflict takes place, and whatever its nature would be, we notice that violations, even of the most fundamental principles of international humanitarian law, law of war, human rights law, take place, and short afterwards, the various perpetrators are trying to provide justifications and excuses on both operational and legal grounds. The humanitarian dialogue is an excellent tool, as we all know, towards our common effort to reduce human suffering, particularly in conflicts. And where political dialogue might be difficult or impossible, then mediation or another different assistance should take place on humanitarian grounds. It would enable parties in conflict to address key issues, such as safe access and protection of civilians, particular needs for women and children, displaced populations, and negatively affected minority groups. The humanitarian dialogue is intended to complement and support potential peace efforts and keep open essential and discrete channels of communication, whereas humanitarian mediation often provides a way to begin dialogue when other methods are impeded, and it can engage in non-state actors who may otherwise be excluded, as well as the United Nations themselves and humanitarian agencies. This could provide a valuable confidence-building process for subsequent peace negotiators. Preventing and resolving armed conflicts is the surest means of doing so, and dialogue based on humanitarian and human rights principles can assist in achieving political settlements, and there is no doubt that informal initiatives of private foundations can usefully complement formal diplomacy. The substantial support of peace processes is a key element, including facilitation of discussions and mediation action where appropriate